This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat again with legendary artist Jim Fitzpatrick, who celebrates his 80th birthday in December of this year. Jim chats about his special relationship with the driving force behind Thin Lizzy, Phil Lynott, about his life obsession with Celtic mythology, and the goddess, or Saint Breed, and his work with Irish legend Sinead O'Connor. Jim is as passionate and as motivated as ever, and is still busy on commercial and private work, including art to highlight some of the atrocities in the world today. Finally, we get to hear about Jim's love of football and his recipe for a long, enjoyable life. Let's hear from Jim. So we know the story, the logo and the band and everything, but Phil, you were pals. Can you tell me about him?
Let me tell you something very quickly. Nobody talks about male suicide. My best friend I've mentioned when I was a kid, Tony Donegan, he committed suicide. My best friend in school was a man called Michael Boyd. He committed suicide, right? My best friend after I left school and in life generally, I would say I have about 4 best friends, and Philip was certainly one of them. We just got really close in a very short time. I used to stay over with him in Welbeck Mansions in West Hampstead. Myself, Frank, and Tom Collins, a photographer, a good mate of ours. The 4 of us used to call ourselves the Gang of 4. Because when we were in Li Ho Fook's famous Chinese restaurant, right, that Philip and Frank loved, it was invaded by Red Guards. Now, I don't know if anybody knows what the Red Guards were. They were the most fundamentalist Chinese communists you could imagine. They were the Hamas or the whatever you like, the ISIS of their day. And I thought I was seeing things. Red Guards coming into a restaurant in London. And we looked out the window and there was 10 or 20 of them, all in full uniform.
Wow.
Right? And they were coming and hassling everybody, you know? And I was looking at them going, hey, you know? And I was saying, German Mao! Thinking, I don't want to be shot. I don't know what these guys are going to do. You know, I was trying to look friendly.
As one does.
Long story quite short, they were marched back to the Chinese embassy under police escort. But this was a real thing. They were real Red Guards. So the 4 of us were there, myself, Philip, Frank, and Tom Collins. And after that, we called ourselves the Gang of 4, because the Gang of 4 was the famous one that tried to overthrow Chairman Mao, you know, Lin Piao and Madame Mao and the gang. You know? So we were always the Gang of 4. But then again, to me, Philip committed slow suicide. And how many people in one person's life can you befriend and they're all good people and they kill themselves? I mean, male suicide is a huge problem.
And Jim, you were watching this happening to your buddy.
Well, in Philip's case, it was almost like slow suicide.
Yeah.
And I was telling him, I would talk to him. I mean, I'm great friends with Caroline and the kids, and Caroline used to tell me, I would ring Philip. Oh yeah, I convinced him to get 2 bikes. I mean, myself and Frank organised games of football games out on the beach here. You know, Brush Shields, Noel Bridgman, Tom Collins, all the gang of Harry Woods. We had a totally crazy bunch. Philip would fly people over from London. You know what I mean? We'd all play football on the beach at party. But we used to try and do that every month. And myself and Frank had a plan. We wanted Philip healthy. We wanted to clean him out. He wouldn't admit to us he was doing heroin. He refused to admit to us. You know what I mean? I saw, when I was over in London staying with him, tin foil with all the burn marks underneath. You know, he was chasing the dragon. He'd burn heroin and inhale it. Do you know what I mean? He was saying he wasn't doing heroin and swearing to his mother as well.
I saw one of his very last gigs. It was with a band called Grand Slam. I'm not sure if you remember. He played Sir Henry's in Cork.
Yeah, I'm great friends with Jerome Robson, who was with Philip in Grand Slam. Jerome was
the keyboard player, was it?
Marvin Gaye's band leader, you know.
Yeah.
I only met Jerome about 3 months ago, we had a great get-together, you know.
It was just, oh my God, the saddest thing. And there was no pulling him back from it. It was just denial and... Yeah.
I've often described it, you see a man drowning, because I live on the beach. Well, I haven't seen people drown. I've seen the helicopters looking for them. There was a kid drowned here last year, 14 years old. But it was like watching someone drowning and being near enough to them that you could just throw them the fucking lifebuoy and the rope and watch as they just let it go past them, you know?
When you think of him, what makes you smile?
Oh, just the time I spent together. We had a great laugh. I mean, Philip had a short life, but by Jesus, did he live it? You know, last 2 years, you can exclude that from my comment, because the last 2 years were brutal. I didn't like anything I saw. I saw his life being destroyed. I saw his family being destroyed. He adored his children. He didn't abandon them, but Caroline had to take them away from that toxic atmosphere. And it's only 6 doors up the road from where I'm living right now. I live on the same road. I moved out here. At least I got a flat out here. My marriage broke down. I moved out here. But I bought this apartment originally because myself and Philip loved hanging out on the beach here. So, you know, you're at this huge loss for someone that you got to know really well is suddenly not telling you truths. He's lying about drug use. And I'm not someone who's going to hammer somebody from drug use. I know how these things happen. I'm trying to, I know it sounds lewd. I smoked dope all my life. I'm 80, thank God, and a lot of it has to do with dope, trust me. And I was trying to get him to smoke dope, not drink so much. People leave out all this drink out of the Tin Lizzy story. He was on a bottle of brandy a day at the end. Do you know what I mean? Imagine what that does to your liver and kidneys. He was doing coke and he was doing heroin. He was also doing a huge amount of tablets. I call them tabs. I don't know what they were. I got into real trouble because I fucked a jar of them out of a car once. 10 grand's worth. Do you know what I mean? I hate all that stuff. Don't get me going. You know, I'm like God's avenger when it comes to that stuff, you know. But it was destroying my friend. And slowly but surely, he disconnected himself from me, from Frank. I remember Frank ringing me up because he said, I'm going to a party tonight in Phillips. I'll try and fucking get hold of him and somehow stop this, and we can go over there, maybe stay with him, get him through it, cold turkey. I don't care what we could afford to hire help. He had loads of money. But Frank told me that when he went over there, he couldn't even get near Philip. Philip would nod at him. This is his friend from Crumlin, from childhood. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure it's the same for Brian Downey, watching his best friend go down a tube. I've never asked him about it because I'd say it's too bloody painful. He didn't suffer like that. You know, and remember, we all kind of grew up together. I was a young man when I met him. I wasn't some old guy. You know, we were young, vibrant. We thought we had the world at our fingertips.
You did.
Philip and myself, I don't know, we hadn't got anything at that point. It was before Lizzie got really famous. But I'd go down Portobello with him. I remember he bought me this lovely scarf because I like scarves. And I still have it somewhere. And people would fawn all over him. And I just sit there basking in his reflected glory, you know. It was just fabulous, you know, and he was such a gentleman back then as well, you know. He had time for everybody, and even to the end, he really did put himself out there trying to help Irish bands. He produced Irish bands, all free, you know, but everything he wanted to do was being killed by the drugs. Everything. He was a very idealistic person as well, don't forget, you know. Yeah,
I love that video of him walking through Dublin, Old Town.
It's made by Jerry Gregg, who was a member, he was one of the official IRA guys who used to, not official IRA, official Sinn Féin guys, I used to call it, lefty. And I remember talking, not to Jerry, to one of his people at the time. And the biggest problem was to get Philip out of bed. The first day he didn't get there till hours later. And remember, you've no budget. You're with RTE. It's an RTE production. And they're trying to make a movie of a really great song. And the next day, Philip turned up on time and they got that piece of history now. You know, it's an amazing piece of film. One of the best ever, I think, of him, you know.
It captures him and his love of Dublin and the cheeky smile. And
it's his swan song. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
you know?
It really is. So, Jim, Sinead O'Connor, I know you've done some very, very special work with her. And I think looking at your work, that brought the world of photography into Jim Fitzpatrick and how I look at you and what you do. So I have a few questions with you. In getting to know an artist, what's your process and how does photography fit into all of that? And maybe specifically about Sinead and your experiences with her.
Well, around that time, that was around 2000. I met her, I think, 1997. digital photography was coming in. Now I had all my Nikon cameras and I had all that stuff. I'd worked in advertising. I had taken a lot of photographs myself, but I always hired top class professionals like Tony Higgins or Walter Pfeiffer. And I'd no wish to be a photographer, even though my father was a photographer, right? It's something that I enjoyed as a hobby. I wouldn't have photographed very many women, I think, around that period. One of my best muses from that time, I'm still great friends with. She now has a beautiful daughter herself that I've drawn. And I'm going back to God, I'm going very far back. But fast forward, around 2000, I was in Los Angeles with my son. And he's expert at all this stuff. And he had bought the first digital cameras a couple of years previously. Like, he paid a fortune for just a small Mickey Mouse camera. I still have the 2 megabyte card that I keep as a souvenir, because every now and then I have the camera still. I put it in and I take a photograph. People are amazed, because what I did was took a crap photograph of my huge pixels and then softened them. And the software was extraordinary. They're quite beautiful in a strange way. They look like paintings, you know? So I still use that little camera. But I started getting commissions to do photographs. Now, my great regret is, why wasn't I doing this when I was hanging out with Philip? I think we've one photograph together. You know what I mean?
That's terrible.
Frank Murray, his best friend, had 2. We didn't think of taking out the camera and snapping stuff. And I had cameras, but they were too heavy. You know, and of course, I was stopped all the time by British police at the airports because they'd hair down to my waist and I wore denim on platforms. And I used to just walk straight over to the detectives when I arrived, didn't bother queuing, because I knew they were going to pull me out. You know what I mean? Let them get on with it. So carrying a big, heavy camera was just out of the question. I would have been taken to pieces, you know? But later, by the time I met Sinead, I was friends with a lot of different. Oh, yeah, I know what. My friend Audrey, who's my muse and best friend since she was 17, was a very beautiful young woman I was introduced to. Her mother brought her over here to me. And it was about something else entirely. And I just said to the mother, I've got to photograph your daughter, if that's okay. And her neighbours, so there was nothing creepy and pervy going on. And I started working with her and we became great friends, and we still are. During lockdown, she came over and did my shopping for me and all. And we had to throw stuff up to the balcony. That's how scared we were of. We didn't know what this virus was, how contaminated anything could be. Even the food you were throwing up, you caught it in gloves, you know? You didn't know what the fuck was going on. But we stayed great friends. But I had put her into a model agency run by Eddie Shanahan called Elaine's, which was one of the most beautiful model agencies and well run. Elaine's was named after Elaine Doody, and she was a top model herself. They had Mary Staunton, Laura Birmingham. They had some of the really top models. And I put Audrey in with Eddie, and he sort of groomed her into a really good model. And she got a huge amount of work. And of course, I had been sneaking her into Lily's Bordello, right? Because she was, A, she hadn't got a key, and B, she was a bit young. She was 17 or 18. 19 even. And I put her together with all her boyfriends because I knew some good-looking, decent men. You know what I mean? They were all good guys, including Tim Wheeler of Bash and Colin Devlin of the Devlins, all beautiful young men. And we've been friends because of that connection for so long. But that brought me into model photography because they saw the pictures I was doing of Audrey. And I remember Andrea Roach asked me to do her model pictures, and I did a Z card for her that was outstanding, one of the best photographs I've taken, because she was pissed off at me and angry. And I said, that's what I'm looking for. Up to that, I was all smiley, you know, the typical model smile. And I got this flair, and she put that on her Z card as the front page. And from that, I got to know an awful lot of really good people, some of whom are still very close friends of mine. You mentioned Yvonne Ellard. I worked with her from 2001. And we're still friends today, you know, but I did stunning pictures of her. So I was working with all these beautiful girls, right? And I'll try to say it in a nice way. I'm a safe pair of hands. That's the only way to describe it. I don't force myself on people. I'm much more interested in capturing beauty. I love the idea of, it's almost like the film Stealing Beauty, because you're getting something that exists for such a short amount of time. I mean, we all have such short lives. Even at 80, I'm complaining my life is too short. And to get that moment in time when a girl or a young woman looks a particular way at a particular point in time is amazing. Now, I didn't just focus on models. I had a great habit of finding gorgeous girls on the street and saying, can I take your picture? Look me up on Facebook or something. You know what I mean? the person I'm meeting today, Monica Lockman, I was flown over to Russia to photograph the Tchaikovsky Perm Ballet for Life magazine, which was a big magazine at the time, and The Independent, not the famous Life magazine, the Irish one. And I spent all my time I was there as a paid professional photographer, right? So I got a lot of professional gigs as well. But I never wanted to be a photographer. It was my way of bringing my art and work together. So I went, for 30 years, I worked on a thing called Mostly Women, which was my excursion into the world of drawing, painting, and photographing women. But because it became so personal, I decided I'm not publishing any of this stuff. At first, I was publishing it. It was all over Twitter, all over the net. And they're very beautiful, not to be ashamed of. I'm very proud of them. But I don't want that taking over my life, which it did. I had to pull back from it. I was having far too good a time. I was being taken out non-stop, day and night. You know what I mean? I learned one thing in life because I grew up with women. When you treat them properly, by Christ, do they look out for you. I've had 4 hot dinners in the past couple of years from people I've known years ago. Even last week, beautiful girl I painted, put up the painting on Instagram and then took me out for lunch. And, my idea is you split the bill or I'll pay. I'm happy to pay because she sat for me and didn't charge me anything, of course. But she picked up the tab and I just said, listen, because she's young, she's only about 23. I said, you're working hard in London to earn this money, for God's sake. And she said, no, you used to do it for me. Now I'm doing it for you. And that's why I love working with women. And I still will work with women. But I have a big one on the canvas here. I could turn you around hold on, wait till I just move something and then I'll show you. Stand it up a bit. There we go. But right now, you can have a little sneak preview even. Let me see if I can see what you're seeing as I twist you around my studio. On a canvas there, you can see another painting coming up. That's Audrey again. That's the last painting I'm doing of her. I've said that, right? So I wanted to show her as a person, with a great sense of style and fashion, like my mother, who was a fashionista, fashion buyer. And it's kind of like my tribute to her because she was the muse who inspired me to go in that direction. Now, she's not a young kid anymore, so let's leave it at that. But she still looks incredible. She's a personal trainer in London and bloody fit and in great shape, But I just love recording her at this age. I won't say what age it is.
Yeah, fantastic. And capturing someone like Sinead commercially, capturing her in a moment, and that moment, the work that results of it, being the cover of an album, or being a photo shoot that goes with that album. Because in a way, when you're introduced to her, you're the curator, aren't you? You're trying to capture the different looks, capture the essence of her, but it's a huge responsibility on your part, isn't it?
Well, I planned it beforehand. I'd worked with Sinead a couple of times. She knew me well. She liked me. We got on like a house on fire. I was in her apartment many times. She was living near Christchurch at the time. Before she met her then next husband, I think Neil, wasn't that his name? An English guy. Very nice character. But Sinead one day asked me I'm trying to remember how it happened. It was almost like a fashion shoot. She's a good friend of Lainey Keogh, the fashion designer. And she said she got some really cool outfits and would I take some pictures of her? And she wanted to use them for an album, which was yet untitled. It turned out to be Shanno Snua. She wanted a very Irish album and a very Irish look. She didn't want to look like a punk, but she didn't want to look like a fashionista either. Do you know what I mean? She hates all that kind of crap. She just wanted to look like herself. And Lainey's clothes were kind of very heavy knitted fabrics, with the colours of the heather and the moorlands and all that kind of stuff. And we arranged a photo session and it was very casual. It sounds like, promotional thing. It's not. She just wanted me to take some cool pictures of her that she herself could look at and think, wow, I looked good at that point in time, I went down I couldn't even tell you where I went, but it was Donal Lunny's recording studio in a huge mansion in the middle of Wicklow somewhere with beautiful trees and gardens and everything and overgrown gardens like the nettle patch I put her into. And it was just a magical day because she let me do whatever I want and she'd say, back in a minute and she'd come out in another outfit for me. You know what I mean? Some of them I haven't published. There's brilliant ones that I love, but she looks kind of weird in them. She wore a really big, oversized, I think it was white or pinkish white suit, jacket and trousers in the works. And I took some in there and I loved them. But they're kind of cartoonish, you know what I mean? And with Sinead, you have to be respectful, you know. Now, she loved them herself, but we never published them. They're still sitting in my files, you know. So it was a magical day because I knew her very well, but that was the first day I was able to gauge when to let her just vanish while I was working with her. Let her drift. I used to say to her, just go far away and just relax. Forget about me. Just look over and just find a spot there in the door and just rest your eyes on it. Right? Once I had that eye line, because she's beautiful eyes, I had to focus on them. She would be all fun. She'd make grimaces. She'd, play, do hand, all kinds of stuff. And then I'd say, just relax now for a minute. While I was thinking what I'd do next. And I noticed that when I did that, much more effective, because I was thinking and she knew my mind was elsewhere. So she relaxed. And that's when I got some of the most beautiful photographs where she's just almost ethereal. And she had that about her. A lot of women have it, of course, but she had it in excess. I don't know what you'd call it, but it's a deep spirituality. And it doesn't come from a distorted mind. It comes from a good place where someone, to me, is almost angelic. It's almost spiritual, or maybe it is spiritual, you know? So I was lucky on that day. I got some photographs that reflected that, which are much more important than the ones that don't. The one I use on my Facebook page of her lying on the grass, she's asleep. That was spontaneous. I didn't say lie on the grass there. We're out in the garden and she just plonks herself down and says, take a picture. And I took some beautiful pictures. And then I said, just doze off there, just relax. And she did. I got that magical picture. I'm never going to take a picture like that again. If anybody wants to see it, it's on my Facebook page. I leave it as the banner. Because as long as I remember Sinead, I just remember that picture, that moment. Now, there's other funny moments, like there's other photographs where she's standing in a bed of nettles, because I said, oh, go on over there and stand against the nettles. I didn't mean in the nettles, against the nettles. She went straight into the nettles. I started cracking up. I said, for God's sake, I won't even say what I said, but I mentioned that her bum might get a couple of stings. And the next thing, she stuck her bum into the nettles. And we used a picture of the album cover. And it's not the highest quality. It was early digital cameras. Do you know what I mean? I was just trying this one out because it looked good. I had a Nikon F1 with me as well. And I took some with that I've never published, because for some reason towards the end of the session, when I switched over to film, we went out into the garden. She went up in a tree and sat there, but she looked so lost and melancholy. I felt almost, because she changed out of beautiful clothes. She's now in her day clothes. And I always felt the fantasy was over. She was now back to reality. But that was the last time I photographed her, I think. I know we'd had loads of me. Oh, no, I won't get into it, but I did a very famous nude of her that was all over the world's media, because I was in South Africa, came home, and I was doorstepped by Sky News, who said that they had learned that I had painted Sinead, I don't know how to describe it, in the style of the Rokeby Venus by Velasquez. They didn't say that, I'm saying that. And I said, no, don't know what you're talking about. And they said, Jim, it's on the front page of the Times of India. So I doubted on that, and I don't want to talk about it for a very simple reason, that since then Sinead has converted to Islam, and I'm a follower of Islam. I study Islam, and I understand they have distinct, I don't want to call it religious views, but distinct traditions that you do not expose the female body. And with respect to Sinead, who was I don't mean I put her on the path to it, because we both talked about this a lot, but was very committed to Islam, and I don't want to disrespect her by using her images from a previous incarnation when she was a Christian or a rebel or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? So I don't show that painting now at all, even though I'm damn proud of it. Holy Christ, am I? Yeah.
And the iconic smoking picture, because she didn't want to be photographed smoking a cigarette, did she?
No, she didn't want to. It wasn't that she was afraid of publicity. She didn't want to encourage anybody to smoke. She knew it was deadly and dangerous, but she always had to have a fag. And that one there, I said, come on, let me do one. She said, okay, go ahead. She let me away with murder, That's why I would never disrespect her. I mean, she was difficult. The last couple of years, I wasn't in touch with her. I got one phone call through an intermediary, Donald Lynch, who was a very close friend of hers, who asked me if Sinead could get one of my James Connolly prints, and wanted to pay for it. And I'm going, like, Sinead isn't paying for it. Just give me an address. But then the pandemic came and it got lost in the shuffle,
Celtic mythology. and that huge attraction of it to you. And there's a huge A to Z of work that you've done there. And I'm thinking in particular with Breed or Bridget 1500, that huge anniversary. What draws you to it and the focus on particular characters? Where does all that come from?
I'll talk very briefly about Breed. I don't know if I mentioned this before. I was a founding member, invited by Melanie Lynch, who's the driving force behind Her Story Ireland. Her story is deliberate. It's like history with the word her. And her refers to women. So it's the women who have been excluded from history. And we set out on a huge project to change that with the help of dozens of other women. They all got on board. It was like kicking in an open door. You know what I mean? Even Catherine Martin, the minister, got on board. And my idea and Melanie's was, though I'm more radical, was to have a St. Bridget's Day. I wanted to have a St. Sheila's Day, because before the famine, St. Sheila's Day followed St. Patrick's Day. And it was the one day women were actually not allowed to work. Right? It was a taboo. The men had to do all the work. The boys had to do all the work. Get up in the morning, feed the hens, feed the chickens, feed the bloody cows, do whatever the hell you like. Leave the poor woman in peace and have her a lion for once in her life. And with Maynooth and all that, the establishment is, Irish Catholicism became very nasty and conservative, very narrow, where before it was very liberal. It was very obviously nationalistic, anti-British. So everything they did was like fingers up to the authorities. And if you read Merriman's Midnight Court, that tells you everything about society at that time. It was a very wild Irish society, and I'd say fun. They drank too much and, potatoes grew freely. You could eat as much as you like and nobody starved. So the population went up to about 8 million or something. So certainly 7. We don't know. 1 million, 2 million were wiped out in the genocide of the famine. But we'd had 2 genocides before that. This was nothing new. In 1740, nobody in Ireland gives a shit about it. We had a massive famine. And then they put a price of a fiver on our heads. Fiver on a tay, kill them. Same as a fiver for a wolf, So there's a lot going on long before that. Look at the Elizabethan plantations. So the role of women, if you look at Grace O'Malley and Queen Elizabeth I, you see what Irish warrior women were like. They led the tribe. They weren't afraid to face up to something. Grace O'Malley got the pirate rights for the west of Ireland as a consequence of that meeting. It's recorded in documents. And fast forward to Bridget. We've always had a female patron saint. We've always had St. Bridget's Cross. It comes from an earlier religion, an animistic religion that regarded the earth as a living thing, that regarded everything as a living thing, from trees to plants to humans to animals. And it was a very different shamanistic approach to religion that St. Patrick, when he came here, recognized, because it was a healing religion. And I'm only guessing here, but based on knowledge from other people who know more about that period than I do, they were kind of like hospitalers, like the Knights Hospitalers. The cult of Breed, the goddess, was a healing cult. They looked after the sick. Simple as that. And I think what happened after St. Patrick came, it simply became Christianized, and the story of St. Bridget became the story of a saint, not a goddess. I mean, what saint can roll out her cloak when the king offers her land, as far as your cloak will go, and she throws her cloak out and it takes over a bloody multi-acres. You know what I mean? That doesn't sound like an average Catholic Christian saint. That sounds like goddess to me. So to me, she's both. And somewhere in the middle, there's truths. Probably of 2 people. One, to say the Bridget, the Breed, the goddess who gave her name to the cult. 2, St. Bridget, who came after and simply took the name and became a sacred person in the Christian religion. This is before Catholicism.
And again, that work, for anyone who is inspired to see it, that's all available on the website.
And one last thing, from that, and I can't say it's mine, I give all the credit to Melanie Lynch. She is the driving force behind Her Story, and a good board as well. I'm retired now from it, but I was 5 years there. And we got a national holiday, again, thanks to Catherine Martin, I think. I hope I'm giving the right people credit, for St. Bridget's Day. But I would love to see it lumped together with St. Patrick's Day and make a real festival for men and women, But anyway, we have a St. Bridget's Day, but there's no day. It's a national holiday. But I would put a law into that says any woman caught working her husband will be arrested.
Well, maybe someone should put Jim Fitzpatrick in charge. You're a passionate man. I know you have very strong views about a lot of this shit that's going on in the world and everything. And I know you express that on Twitter and on social media and all that kind of thing. Do you express that through your work? I'm looking at you now and I can see your pencils and your brushes alongside you. When you're angry and ferocious, does the canvas come out?
Yeah. I have done a lot of work with Palestine. Oh no, and the Kurdish people, we leave them out of every equation. They're being persecuted by Turkey, slaughtered. And Iran too. But where do I start on that? I recently got an award. I was very honored to get the top award from the Palestinian people, the Palestinian government and embassy for my work for Palestine. And I don't want to go into all the details of it, but I'll give you a simple example. Marwan Barghouti is the Nelson Mandela of Palestine, recognized by Hamas and by Fatah as the greatest of their leaders. He's in jail for 500 years, I think. They went on hunger strike. I'm talking about the Palestinian prisoners for what I would call decent human rights and decent treatment. They want to be able to read newspapers, have books, watch television, have medical attention, and have family visits properly. And they went on strike for stuff we take for granted in our prisons here. Israeli prisons are brutal. They might as well be Turkish prisons. They're just as evil, And this man and his comrades stood up and said, no, we're going to starve ourselves to death. Now, I'd been in town the night of the burning of the British embassy and the hunger strikers and all that stuff that went on here. And I saw the carnage that caused on both sides and the innocent lives lost. Not because of them, but because of the circumstances. And I have a huge admiration for the Jewish people, not the Zionists. I've read every book in the Holocaust, so I don't have to have it explained to me what they went through and what some of them are going through from their own government right now, because the Israeli government are brutal towards Holocaust survivors. Trust me on that. There's a wonderful, wonderful Holocaust survivor who has done sculptures of the Holocaust that are horrifying, and they won't touch him. Even the gallery there has refused to show his work again. A genius. They're the people who are victimized, not just Palestinians. But anyway, Marwan Barghouti and his people were going on strike, and I was appalled because I thought, Jesus, this will tear down the house again. They just rebuilt it, trying to build peace with those animals in Netanyahu's government. And I did a poster from a drawing given to me by his wife, Magda, who I'm now very good friends with. And he's holding himself up like that with his hands in chains. And I did a drawing of that very quickly, 2 colors and a wash, and put it up and gave it to them. And they circulated it in Palestine. And Haaretz, the Jerusalem newspaper, Jewish newspaper, who are brilliant. They are really strong against Netanyahu and against the abuse of Palestinians. Jewish people are superb. We should never forget that. And when they get annoyed, it's injustice. Watch what happens. I give Netanyahu, I think he's on borrowed time. I don't care if he's winning left, right, and center. He's on borrowed time from his own people. Right? I'm not talking about killing him. I'm talking about people waking up and saying, get rid of this bastard, which all the youth are. If you look at the polls, they hate him. Even the survivors of these massacres by Hamas, which I denounce, those survivors have gone wild at him for daring to use them as his excuse to slaughter people, right? So long story quite short, Haaretz ran this with a note about me, the arse de Shea. And the next day, the problem was solved. They got what they wanted. Now, I don't know if I'm, a righteous Gentile or something, or the opposite in their mind, maybe. But I felt, my God, I think I did something right. You know what the Torah says? You save one life, you save the world. I could be misguided and misled and everything, but Magda Barghouti, his wife, who's also a top lawyer in Ramallah, came over here and took me out for dinner to thank me. So I did something right. And when you do something right in your life, the joy you get for saving people, Jewish, Palestinian, is immense. Not often do you get that because you work in the dark all the time.
That expression, Jim, a picture paints 1,000 words. I always think in a 2023 context, and if you're weighing up the attention that a picture gets and words will get, in this time-poor world where no one is paying attention to anything, I would say a picture paints 1,000,000 words. Proportionately it's gone the other way because we're not reading anymore. We're not giving ourselves enough time to educate ourselves on topics.
I'm finding it hard. I have a huge book on the Holocaust called K1. I find it hard to read. There's so many distractions. You're on the open phone looking at stuff. You see something in the book even about a town and you go to Google and suddenly you're not reading. The flow is gone. It's quite extraordinary. Even at my age, it's not because my mind is warped. It's because I'm doing what young people do.
Yeah. So the craft that you have has got the potential at any time to cut through all of that.
Oh, it's the focus on a painting, focus on a work and cut the world out. But I tell you what, I could do it expertly when I was younger. It is much harder now. Now, let's get this right. I'm not someone who sits in silence. I have the television on all day long, just whatever's on is on. The Today Show is probably the most relaxing thing you can watch. Oh, I love it. I love good Irish shows, I hate being bombarded with English TV programs. I have to be honest. I don't like EastEnders or any of that kind of stuff. It's not big.
Thank God.
Not my type, sorry. It's not as though I have to be totally focused on what I'm doing. I like distraction that occupy my idle mind. But there's so much now to occupy my idle mind. You look up something on Twitter or you look up something on Google and geez, you're into a whole minefield or a rabbit hole for hours. Right. And I'm like anybody else. I get transfixed by some things and I want to know more.
Well, there's so much noise around so many of these events. I think the world needs the simplicity and the cut through of Jim Fitzpatrick and his work. In terms of the commercial dimension to what you do, obviously, like the rest of us, you need to make a living. How does that work?
I'll tell you in a minute, but let me talk about Celtic mythology very quickly. Because we've been talking about all my important work and all the rock work and Tin Lizzy and Sinead. My life is Celtic mythology. They are all additions, you might say, that make my life interesting and exciting. You don't get that from Celtic mythology and working with Celtic mythology. The goddesses don't walk in your door and make you tea. As Sinead did many times. Well, too. Because the minute I arrived, I said, put on a kettle. I'm not a big drinker and I don't smoke dope ever during the day because I can't function. But I love a cup of tea all day long. I mean, that's what I'm drinking now as I'm talking to you. But the Celtic work is my obsession and the Celtic world is my obsession. It has been since I was a young kid. And I won't go into all the details. I spent time down in County Clare because I had TB and I learned to play with cows, ride calves, play with bonobs. I had the most magical time of my life. And I think what happened there was all the diseases I got trying to recover from TB. I think they gave me an immune system that it's extraordinary. I'm still alive. I should be long gone. My father died at 57. My grandfather, 52. My grandfather, 47. There were other circumstances involved, like the Great Flu, or in his case, exhaustion from overwork. But I'm amazed I'm still around, and I love it. I think it's hilarious. I crack up when my kids tell me, will you stop saying you're 80? You're not 80 yet. And I'm going, I'm effing 80. I don't care. I'm 80. I've always wanted to be 80.
But someone can still commission Jim Fitzpatrick for some work.
Back to your question about commercial work. Yes, I do commercial work all the time.
I want that phone ringing, Jim. I think, and the emails coming in.
I'm not flavour of the month anymore. I don't mind at all. I've still got some interesting commissions. I had a great meeting the other night with a man who wants me to do some work with him, a magician called Steve Spade. And he did some extraordinary little card tricks for me, huge card tricks. But he did something else that was extraordinary when we were having a coffee up in East. And one of the girls there, Laura, was passing. And I said, Laura, do you like magic? She's one of the people who look after us. And she said, oh, yeah. So I said, Steve, I thought he'd do a simple card trick. What he did was amazing because I love anything quasi-psychic, supernatural. He took the spoon from the cup and gave it to her, right? So he is not touching it. It's in her hands between her finger and her forefinger, and it starts moving. Now you can imagine what she was feeling because I was going, holy. Right? And without him touching it, he did these kind of passes over it because I presume it's from the magnetism. You need to do something like this. And he bent his spoon into a V. And it stayed like that. She still has it, But that's the sort of stuff you get out of nowhere, and that probably will lead to commission of some kind. But I'm always interested in the people who are commissioning me. as a commission. I worked with Joey Shore down for West Cork Distillers on the Tin Lizzie whiskey and the Johnny the Fox spiced rum. And it's just a label. But by Christ, this is the most beautiful label I've ever seen. Right? The Johnny the Fox ones, particularly, I mean, it's embossed. It's got gold leaf on it. And on the blood, on the rose, it's got glazing on it. Like, holy, beautiful stuff. So you get strange commissions that you think, when he said labels for Tin Lizzie, I thought, yeah, we'll stick a logo on it, maybe a black rose. But when you see it, when it was finished, because we put a lot of work into it, and they did too, it is magnificent. I love them. I have empty bottles out there with labels on. I don't know what to do with them. They're lovely. They're Tin Lizzie icons. I thought I'll put tea in them and bring them up to the Vibe and hand them out there. And of course, they'd be so drunk they'd probably have to drink the tea. But there you go. They're so beautiful, I don't want to throw them out. But they're going up to the glass shop, or the glass recycling place, I think, in the next week or two. I have to get rid of them, because I got a free case.
Yeah, I think you might have some takers if people connect with you on the website. So if people do want to connect with you, just onto your website, send an email.
Absolutely. Yeah, they can contact me there. I'm not hiding. My son runs my website, but any contact, there's a thing called contact on the website, and you contact and send an email and I'll reply, I'm always interested in interesting work. I love anything odd or weird. There's a couple of weird things coming off. If they come off, it'll be beautiful. Next month, on the 14th November, I'm doing a gig for Universal because they're relaunching a huge box set of Vagabonds, right? And I'll show you, wait till I show you something before we go. In the Vagabonds box, right, I gave them a lot of old stuff I did over the years for Tin Lizzie. When I'm doing stuff, I do a plethora of stuff. And nobody's seen this, but it was on my website years ago. And it's the negative for Vagabonds. I make paper negatives, right? So they've reprinted it as a print, and I've obviously signed it,
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful.
I just thought, these are things you throw out. Luckily, I don't throw out fucking anything to do with Tin Lizzie, but I'm lucky to have them. But what that is I would do a line drawing and then I put it on a huge camera, like it's 4 foot high, with a bellows on it. And you put a plate of glass, you put it on top and you put a positive paper and you project it through it and you made a print. And that's what I did with all the Lizzie work,
You must have some amount of storage around the place for all of this.
I have an attic full of crap. It is artistic crap, top to bottom, but it's full. Now, that's not counting a huge comic collection because I'm a Marvel comic fanatic.
I can feel an exhibition coming along. Did you ever talk to the lads in the Little Museum of Dublin?
No, I know Trevor. When he was opening the Little Museum, I gifted him a couple of posters. I don't know if he has the nightlife one up there, but a couple of Lizzie posters and a Shay and one for Club Elizabeth, which was the first discotheque that I designed with my cousin,
It sounds like a good club.
That was 1968.
Wow. I was 3 at that point. I wasn't allowed to go to discos.
I was probably about 54. I seem quite ancient. We were kids wearing bell-bottoms and flares, and Lionel used to wear my bloody denim platform shoes, and I never got them back. I never forget it. So he gave me that beautiful shirt in return that's on many photographs. I've offered all my stuff to the museums, but the Kilmainham Museum have a fashion department. So I've said I have Philip Lynett's handmade shirt. It was made by Frank Murray's wife, Ferga. Beautiful. And it's magnificent. And I've offered it free. Just take it. And other Lizzie memorabilia, clothes, stuff like that might be useful, because his family, his daughters have nothing. We had a family get-together for his 71st, and we did a pub crawl. I brought them to all the pubs. Myself and Philip and Frank used to hang out, and Tom Collins as well.
The Gang of Four?
The Gang of Four, yeah. All Nearies mostly. And I sat Caroline down in the place we'd been photographed with Philip for the launch of Songs for While I'm Away, and when he was doing his magic tricks. So we're all cracking up laughing in some of them. And it was a wonderful moment, but then I brought Kathleen and Sarah up to the corner where we used to sit, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. And Sarah was wearing this beautiful bright yellow thing with a red slash. And I said, that looks like something Philip wore. I said, is that your dad's? And she said, it is, yeah. And I said, oh, it's great. I said, do you have a lot of his stuff? Yeah, that's the only thing I have belonged to him. Now, I can't go in for legal reasons as to why that is, but it's scandalous. There's a whole story there one day, and Caroline, I hope, will tell it, because they have Sweet Ev all of his remaining clothes, guitars, memorabilia, personal possessions. They've all been, I can't go into it, leave it there, you know?
Yeah, okay. I've got a few last quick fire questions for you, and I know you're meeting your good buddy Monica. What's happiness to you?
What is happiness? Happiness is the buzz I get when I finish a painting that looks right, that I'm not looking at going, what the... Sometimes you get it right. I remember when I did Johnny the Fox especially, and Black Rose. I lived in Sandyford, and I'd be up all night, right through the night, getting everything finished, like spraying that blue background. My daughter always laughs and tells me I was spitting blue out of my nose for years, even for weeks, even though I wore a mask all the time. I wasn't stupid, but it had to be done in a hurry. And the courier would come first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock, right? I'd go back in, have my breakfast, get on my bike, and like cycle up the mountains. And the joy I would feel was fantastic, because A, it was finished, it was on time, but close to the time, usually never more than 24 hours out. And I was free for a while. Well, I'd be getting a couple of bob, because Philip and Chris O'Donnell and Chris Morrison, the managers, were great for getting money for me. You know what I mean? I remember Chris coming in one day and said, I got 3,000 for you for the next one. Now, that was like 30 grand now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were really good to me. And Philip always made sure I was looked after. Towards the end, it all unraveled, because Philip unraveled himself. But working with Tin Lizzy was one of the great joys of my life. I mean, you're dealing with Scott, you're dealing with Brian, you're dealing with Brian Robinson, who I love, even though he's crazy. Gary Moore, holy Christ, Gary. You know, I could write stories about him. Gary was a genius, but my God, was he dangerous to be around, you know? But they were fabulous people, and I was blessed to be considered one of them. I was one of the gang, you know?
He played 2 nights back-to-back at the SFX Hall in Dublin.
Who did, Gary?
Gary Moore. I remember the following day after the gig, walking down Grafton Street, and I saw him, and I actually had the ticket from the gig.
Right.
So I felt I had a good excuse to say hello to him. And he did say hello, and he stopped me, and we had a little bit of a chat. Oh my God, I loved him. I thought he was the best guitarist of the whole lot with Tin Lizzy.
I ran into the guy from Stone Roses, not Stone Roses, what is it? Before that, Ian. Oh, Christ, Ian. Gave Oasis all their inspiration. Band before Oasis and Stone Roses. I can't remember. But is it Ian Brown?
I think you're right.
Yeah, Ian Brown. And I got talking to him on Grafton, a bit like yourself. I didn't know, and but I knew their music. And he said something amazing to me. He said, I'm related, I'm a descendant of Michael Davitt of the Land League.
Oh, Jesus.
He's the guy who's in Harry Potter, you know. But, and he had that kind of swagger, you know, and he's like, that when the the other Gallagher, Liam, developed, everything Liam developed is based on Ian Brown. There's no doubt about that, you know, and he's a huge admirer of Ian, you know, but that casual meeting like you're talking about with Gary, I was with Philip so many times when people would just come up to him with little stories like that, and he loved it. He was totally gregarious and outward, you know.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I hate precious stars who just walk by people, you know.
Yeah, and my mum was delighted because she spotted him at Rory Gallagher's funeral down in Cork. So she was all telling me, you know, so excited.
Poor old Rory, I met him a couple of, I'd say a good 6-7 months before that. I played football, obviously. And myself and my mates used to go to Kylie's in Donnybrook for a drink after football, you know. And Rory was in there, and I hadn't seen him for years, and I went over to him. But he had bloated up hugely. I remember thinking, Jesus Christ, what's happened to him? I still don't know what happened to him, you know, but it didn't look good. I remember thinking, holy God, he was a beautiful looking young man. I met him loads of times, especially when Philip was rehearsing in London. The studio where he was rehearsing was next door. This is Late Lizzie with John Sykes. Rory was in there rehearsing, and I was just sitting there talking to them while they were playing together. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and I'm not stupid. I thought, this is good. It wasn't like, oh, yeah. No, this was good. I loved hanging out when they were playing, you know, when they were rehearsing and having fun before it got nasty. It got nasty with drugs and all the drink and people not turning up and all that crap, you know.
Yeah, Rory Gallagher is buried in the same cemetery as my father.
Whereabouts?
Cork City, out the Ballincollig direction. It's very, very close to Ballincollig.
No, I'd love to go and just pay my respects to. I loved Rory.
Well, I'll meet you there. I'll show you the grave.
And with Gary. Gary's buried in the corner of some small graveyard in the middle of nowhere in England. And I just think, Jesus. I know we're all unimportant and we all end up in fucking graves, excuse my language. But kind of Gary deserves a bit better than that.
Yeah, my mother, I call it the Cemetery Social Club. She's up there every day saying my dad. And one particular day, pouring out of the heavens, she saw this lady struggling with her umbrella up to Rory Gallagher's grave. Mum stopped her, and turns out she's Italian. And it's like a pilgrimage. She comes over every year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, of course, my mother hopped her in the car and drove her back into town to whatever bed and breakfast she was staying. Jim Fitzpatrick, I know you're 79. What do you want to achieve? I know you're not done. What are your objectives?
The problem with any artist, and I think I can be brutally honest, this is inside we all feel underachievers. How much you achieve, you always feel, because the gene is inside you, you could have done so much more. I won't go into all the details, but I'm supposedly descended from Turner. That fanaticism that he had, I have. I've always wanted to paint landscapes. I've painted loads of landscapes, but I'm not up to that standard, and that's a deep disappointment. But you can't be everything, you know? But I decided when I was young, I wanted to create something different, right? That's where the whole urge towards Celtic mythology, and it wasn't just, there was patriotism, there was belief and religion, superstition, everything else involved in it. But I knew that's what I always wanted to do with my life. Even when I was working in advertising, I was doing Celtic posters for all kinds of different people. I loved the whole romance and myth of Irish mythology. I loved the way we kept an extraordinary, distinct, I won't say civilization, but way of living in this country that is foreign and alien to our neighbours. And it was a beautiful way of living. And it's not like we've lost that. It's always still there, but we really do have to discover it and rediscover it. And I think the great thing I can say about my work is it's led people in that direction, which is kind of a more spiritual direction, but also where women are recognised, because we had a matriarchal society as well as a patriarchal society. Some of the great women of our time were people like Queen Maeve up to Grace O'Malley, and Mary Robinson, I'd include her in that. And I think what I've done away with my poster, say, like a Bowen, the goddess of the river Boyne, I've helped a lot of young women realise that their Irish heritage, because remember, women had to emigrate when I was young. There was no right for them here. Their rights were so restricted. Even, you know, if you wanted an abortion, still have to go to England. Crazy shit going on here still against women. Don't tell me abortion is legalised. When I hear that St. Vincent's have performed an abortion, I believe it's legalised. But women's rights back then in the 60s were only beginning to be recognised. The same as the Green movement started there, the whole hippie thing started. But women's rights and feminism all sprang from that same well in the 60s of liberalism. And that liberalism enabled me to get away with spending a huge amount of my life portraying women in a certain way. Now, I'll give you a laugh. I've been criticised. The one painting that Sinead adored was Palu, the cat goddess. And I'll give you two sides of that coin. She admired it hugely because it was powerful and gave her strength. And she told me that personally, while she was going through a very tough period in her youth. She was only like 13, 14, I think. Horrific stuff. But she had that on her wall, and she used to look at it and say, I'm going to be strong like that. I give you the reverse side of that. I'm with my then girlfriend in the Bailey, and in walks the actor Alan Devlin. This is the man who walked off the stage for the Pirates of Penzance and went into the bar, still mic'd, and said, give us a fucking pint. And everybody in the audience could hear him. He was quite a character, but when he walked in, the first thing he said to me, referring to my paintings, the Celtic work, says, here's the man who paints those beautiful women with volcanic breasts. And I remember thinking, that'll be on my gravestone if I'm not careful. Be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. I've one last whopper of a question for you, if that's okay. What was your best day ever?
Oh, my best day ever. God, the first thing that jumps is the birth of my kids. Isn't that weird? Yeah, I suppose my daughter, even though it was a tough one because I didn't get any sleep. She was born in Mount Carmel, and I was staying in two women I worked with in an ad agency, Rena Dardis, who was a wonderful illustrator, and her sister put me up in their house, which was a couple of doors away from Mount Carmel. So when the baby was about to be born, I got a phone call at about 4:00 in the morning, and I could just walk around the corner and in, you know. That was an amazing feeling when I picked her up. And now she's over here next Monday. She's my best mate. And here's her best mate. Go on. And he sleeps with her, leaves me when I'm here. When she's here, I'm nobody. No, it was just that moment of realizing I was only 21, you have to remember. I was only a kid, you know. I don't know what I was on. I think I was on 20 quid a week or something, which was good money back then. And I had a house. I bought a house as well. So, yeah, we brought her home to our house in Baldoyle. I had my first house as well, which I got with I was very good at faking documents. So my earnings were colossal. So I got a really good house, 4 bedrooms. And no, it was just holding my kid in my hand. But it was also a day of fear because I thought, like, what the hell am I going to do with this?
Now the fun starts.
And, you know, the consequence, I don't think we got out socially for about 2 years. We were so broke, we couldn't even buy a pint. But it was wonderful moments like that. What the greatest one is, I have no idea. I'd say that's the only one that I can think of. I haven't achieved anything wonderful. I mean, I won an Inkpot Award the year after George Lucas won it at the San Diego Comic-Con, which is now the huge launching pad. I was a permanent member of their guest list there. I have it on writing that I can come and go as I please anytime, you know. But getting that award was a great moment as well. But awards are awards, 10 a penny. You know? The kid is 10 times better, you know.
Yeah. If there was a day you could have again, what day would it be?
There's moments in my life I love. I played football for Ireland under Mick Byrne in Talca Park, my home ground. I lived right down the laneway from the front entrance in Clonturk Park. And I love football, played it all my life. And I got a couple of opportunities to play really big games for charity, you know, pickup games. And I was picked for Ireland to play against Manchester All-Stars, which are Man United players and Manchester City players grouped together for a charity game. And I was marking one of my heroes, Norman Whiteside, Stormin Norman, the youngest player ever to play in the World Cup, who just retired from Man United, or been retired and paid off because he's so troublesome. But he was still a fitness coach and still powerful. But I had a great game marking him. The toughest game I ever had, which I always look back on too, was playing for the National Union of Journalists, because I played for anybody would get a good game with. And we were playing Hammond Lane, and God, I was marking one of my own heroes, a guy called Eric Barber. League of Ireland people would remember him well. He was an Irish international, but he just retired from playing for Rapid Vienna, for God's sake. And here I was marking him. And the ref was another hero of mine called Ben Hannigan. Now, Shelbourne fans will remember both these players. So I'm marking Eric Barber, and he's kicking the crap out of me. I go up for a ball, and his heel comes down on my shin. All that kind of shit, you know? Professional, elbows in. And I went up to Hannigan, the ref, who was one of his mates. They played together for Shelbourne. And I was at the match where they actually beat the European team, Belenenses, to qualify. I said to Hannigan, I said, for fuck's sake, Ben, I said, that guy's kicking the crap out of me, and you're doing nothing. And do you know what he said to me? Just fucking kick him back. I did, and I had a great game after that. That's the sort of stuff when I'm on my deathbed, I'll be going like, oh, the glories of my time. They're so Mickey Mouse compared to some of the great players like Paul McGrath, Roy Keane, which you live for those little moments, you know, no doubt about it. You look back and you think, yeah, that was good. I was good that day, you know. I was in Talca Park. I was playing on a green pitch that when you passed the ball, it went where you wanted, instead of Phoenix Park or Herbert Park where there were tufts of grass in the way. Every pass I gave was like, wow, I didn't even know I was that good. They were wearing the same clothes. We were all in the fucking white and green. I could see guys a mile away. In Herbert Park, everybody wears whatever they feel like. Look up and call someone before you get in the ball. I should mention one last thing. I played football till I was 68. And I had the best time of my life. I made the best friends you'd ever meet. I had a great time. I loved every minute of it. And I credit that with the long life, because I was playing with cancer for 8 years, not knowing it. And I only discovered recently I was playing with a broken hip as well, because I got a new hip. So it served me well. It kept me fit. And I think it allowed me to beat stuff like cancer. Football, sport, whatever you're doing, do it.
Well, I think you've just given everyone the recipe to a long and healthy life. Keep working, stay fit, and never lose that passion.
Oh, never. When you lose the passion, you might as well die. We're on the earth for a very short time. You've got to use it to the max. Do the least harm you can and the most good you can. And that's tough, even doing that, you know?
Jim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, it's a pleasure. Great pleasure talking to you, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.